292 of Grid Talk. Today we're here to review the 2023 Spanish Grand Prix. My name is Ruby Price, and joining me we have Grid Talk co-host Owain Medford.
Hello.
Grip Strip Podcast's Philip Matthew.
Hello.
And Warren Shaw from Paddock Pals.
Hello.
Before we get into the episode, we must thank our sponsor for this episode, BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your basketball info, stats, news, and scores. Get all the latest odds and lines and the latest matchup reports for this year's NBA basketball playoffs. BetOnline is your sports intel headquarters for this season, as we have you covered for all your insider sports wagering needs. From basketball, MLB, NHL hockey, golf to UFC and boxing. The fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your home. Get in the action today, so head to the website or use your mobile device to join, and be sure to use our promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, to receive your 50% bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts. But first, if you enjoy this podcast, we would love it if you could take 5 to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're one of the 72% of people who aren't yet subscribed to the channel, please consider helping us out with a like and a subscribe. Finishing the race then with 24 seconds to the next car, it was an emphatic win at the Circuit de Catalunya for Max Verstappen, who fought off Carlos Sainz at the start and never looked like losing control of the race. Just the track limits. Before we look at the drivers, though, I think we can all agree that changing the final sector back to the old configuration was absolutely the right decision. It meant cars could follow at the end of the lap and produced a lot of overtakes going into turn one. But Owain, let's take a look at the Williams. Logan Sargent and Alex Albon finishing a lap down in P20 and P16. A rather quiet race from the Williams drivers, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, obviously Sargent started from the back, and the car's just not good enough. It's not good enough for them to be able to fight for any sort of position. So it's they're just sort of swanning around the midfield. Obviously Sargent started kind of on the back foot with a relatively decent strategy off the bat. He started on medium, so that would have helped. But I'll put it this way: the pace disparity was self-evident when you have Sergio Perez starting on the same strategy and starting on the same strategy from the same place and ending up in fourth place, and obviously Sargent couldn't do anything near that. Compared to that, obviously Albon did the best that he could, to be honest, with 16th. I mean, they're probably quite comfortably the slowest car on the grid. But it's a little bit worse than we're used to seeing out of him. But it was a bit of a poor showing for Williams.
Yeah, definitely. And Phil, the Alpha Tauris remain in P9 in the constructors, with De Vries coming home in P14 and Tsunoda in P12 after receiving a 5-second penalty for forcing Zhou off the track at turn 1. What did you make of the penalty, and how was the race for the Alpha Tauri team?
The race for the AlphaTauri team was typical of the AlphaTauri team the last couple of years, which is nondescript, at least for Nick De Vries after a rough Saturday where he really couldn't get grip in that third sector and keep his car straight. He was able to get through this race and finish, albeit I think he probably wanted to finish ahead of Yuki, but even Yuki's best tries to go and run off Zhou and whatever else he was trying to do didn't really mean anything in terms of overall pace and having the ability to contend for back-end points. It's kind of similar to what it has been all year for them, really. Yuki right on the end of the lead lap. De Vries, a lap down. Just an unfortunate, typical result, seemingly what it has been this year, and not a lot of light at the end of the tunnel for them, I would say, at least not for a few months.
Yeah, Warren, before looking at Haas, not Haas, Alfa Romeo, I just want to say, there was a few people in our podcast group chat, basically, that thought the penalty on Yuki was a bit harsh. Where did you feel it lied? Was it harsh? Was it appropriate? And then we'll talk about Alphas afterwards.
I thought it was a bit harsh, because if you kind of look at the same they were side by side basically going into the corner. There was really nothing there. I thought it was a bit harsh. It was just a racing. Someone was going to have to back out, and it was Zhou that kind of he took the safety precaution and go out. But I thought it was a bit harsh there. It was some good racing going in there, and I thought it was quite unfortunate for Yuki that he got the penalty, because I think he's had a pretty solid season. And I mean, he's been fighting in that 9th, 10th, 11th spot all year, and that's probably the best he could do. But I thought it was quite harsh on the penalty there.
Yeah, like I'd say 50-50 on, where it was, but certainly a bit of a question of consistency in terms of that penalty being applied, and we'll talk about that later. But for the Alfa Romeo team, a race of contrast for their drivers. Valtteri Bottas finishing a lowly P19, Zhou Guanyu getting 2 points for a well-fought P9. Should Bottas have performed better, or did Zhou outperform the car, do you think?
Zhou probably outperformed the car, but I think Bottas this season, he is definitely underperforming. The car is not great, but he hasn't had, I don't think, a real race where like, wow, he really outperformed the car on this one. I mean, he's having to play the teammate game early on to slow him down behind it. Like, that's something you would not expect for Bottas. You'd expect that message for Zhou to hear rather than Bottas. But Zhou, I thought that he drove great today. He had a lot of on-track overtakes. It seemed like whenever they showed him, he was passing someone. He was in the action, in the mix, and it was a great race for him. But I think for me, I'm more puzzled about how Bottas has struggled this season in the car. It seems, I don't, maybe it just seems like he's out there just having a nice Sunday drive in F1. Not saying that he doesn't want to perform better, but it almost seems like his will to win seems like it's waned a little bit in this car. It just seems like he's lost some of that competitive fire. I'm just speculating. I don't know, but it just seems like he's just having a good time, enjoying being an F1 driver, and where he finishes is where he finishes. Like, that's fine if you want to do that, and that's what he wants to be. But I mean, he has to be disappointed in these results, I would think.
Yeah, maybe he's become the new Kimi Räikkönen of that team, obviously known for just sort of showing up, enjoying himself, apparently, and then clocking off and going home. But I see what you mean about Valtteri Bottas almost disappearing in terms of this season. In the prelude to it, everyone was talking about him stepping up and being the team leader almost, but the driver that's bringing the points home in the Alfa Romeo team is Zhou Guanyu. Go on, Warren.
I was just gonna say, and it's like not even a surprise that Bottas is in 19th, like finishing 19th, and if he gets knocked out in Q3, like obviously when he was at Mercedes, it'd be a surprise. But even last year, he would consistently get into Q2s, maybe even get into Q3. But now it's just he's a loss. I don't need, but you said it's just confusing.
Definitely confusing. Owain, looking at Haas, P15 for Hulkenberg and P18 for Magnussen, where could the Haas team have gone just to have a better race out there?
I don't know. I with another driver, that's where they could have gone. Hulkenberg, he did it. Clearly, the 3-stop wasn't the way. I think that was pre-judged fairly early, and I'm not sure if that's the pace of the car. I think we'll see maybe in later weeks whether that's just the pace of the car and the upgrades that other teams have brought have distanced them. But we're talking about a team that's currently sitting at seventh? I think seventh in the constructors, and they were just so slow. I mean, Magnussen is not too bad. He's only lost a place compared to at the start. But Hulkenberg, he started seventh. And you've got to be doing better than 15th from a 7th place start. I mean, even with a bad strategy, he would have had a tyre advantage on numerous other cars that finished ahead of him. So it's just, it became clear that wasn't the way to do. Obviously, once you pulled the trigger on that, then you could just got to try and go flat out. But the pace doesn't seem to be in the car. It was just, it's a really poor race for Haas. Obviously, you'd expect, particularly with the way Spain is, the cars to sort of end up once we've gone through the race pace through the race. For the cars to sort of line up 2 by 2. But yeah, no, the Haas absolutely haven't. They've just completely fallen back compared to this relatively strong start to the season. So it's very disappointing.
Yeah, certainly disappointing for the American outfit. Phil, the race was over for Lando Norris at turn 1 even after breaking his front wing in a light coming together with the rear of Hamilton's car. Piastri only managing P13 for McLaren. Was this a missed opportunity, or did they just have a bit of spark in qualifying?
I think it was a missed opportunity, Ruby, because when you get third or fourth, whatever, with Lando and you get both cars in Q3, they had decent pace. They could have stayed up there and gotten a double points finish. You look at the situation where they are behind the top 4 teams. They're battling with Alpine, and Alpine are starting to make gains on a weekly basis. I mean, granted, more on the side of Esteban Ocon at the moment, but today it was a little more balanced for their end. They should have been around where the Alpines were. Yes, Lando lost his race basically in 3 corners, but with the way that the strategies were going, maybe making a different adjustment to pit him in the middle of the race might have given him a little more of an opportunity. Piastri falling back, not really having much of a fight. It's unfortunate, really, for them. We'll see as these races are going on. It looks like these last couple of races, they've had a little bit more pace. I also am personally, I think they should just keep the scheme that they've had the last 2 races, because at least it's unique compared to most of the stuff we have in Formula One. But they'll go back to the regular boring scheme for Canada or whatever, and they'll probably go back to being where they had been when they had that scheme too.
Maybe they should go silver if they're looking for the car performance from delivery at least. Warren, double points finish for McLaren rivals then the Alpines. Ocon finishing P8 and Gasly defending against Leclerc to inherit P10 after the flag. Considering Tsunoda's penalty for his move on Zhou, should Ocon's aggressive defending against Alonso have been brought into question? But also, how was the Alpine race today?
I mean, I think you bring up a good question there. That was quite a dangerous move. I thought defending him, there's no love lost between Alonso and Ocon there. And that definitely showed with that late dive over there. It wasn't even noted, right? That wasn't even noted, I think. I don't know. It was definitely a risky move, but I thought their race was, it was a fine race. Like anytime you can get a double points finish, I think you're going to be happy. I will say though, I did see Otmar at the beginning of the week say that he was they thought they could contend with Mercedes and Aston Martin this weekend. And when he said that, I would say this is a disappointment then when you're really off the pace of those 2 teams. So still anytime you get points, like I said, good. But when you're touting yourself going into this track saying, hey, we're going to be able to potentially contend with Aston Martin and Mercedes, then I'd have to say that's a disappointment. But if he didn't say that, I'd say, hey, good week. But he said that, so it's going to be a disappointment.
I mean, it has been a very consistent thing for Alpine and Renault to be doing, of saying, yeah, we're up here with these teams that are 10 miles down the road from us, when really they are fighting the Astons, but they're fighting the Astons when the Astons are damaged and being held together with tape.
Yeah. And also okay, you got a podium in Monaco. That's great, but no one passes there. So once you're in your spot, basically, and you get a strategy right, you don't mess up a strategy, it's hard for you to lose that position. So it's not like you can say, hey, we got a podium here, let's do it in Spain where the tracks are completely different. That's just not a sensible thing to say or think that that's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Owain, a dismal day for Ferrari yet again, with Sainz dropping down 3 places to finish P5 and Leclerc not even managing to finish in the top 10. Granted, he started from the pit lane after Ferrari couldn't fix the issues from Saturday, but it would appear the upgrades do not appear to have worked.
Yeah, no, in fairness, I was going to say, in fairness to Alpine, actually, they are fighting with the Ferrari in front of them. The fact that Ferrari is terrible is neither here nor there on that one. Yeah, Sainz obviously I think the Ferrari obviously seems to be I didn't see qualifying, so unfortunately I can't speak to the issues that Leclerc clearly had. But I can't believe, I kind of can't believe how they can be so, well, relatively decent in qualifying, and Sainz obviously just dropped away so completely in the race. He started second, and then they had to have both Mercedes and a pit lane starting Perez behind you. Says a lot. I mean, obviously, I know that Perez is in a very fast Red Bull, clearly, and the Mercedes seem to have an amazing race car, particularly with the upgrades. But I think it says a lot about Ferrari that I think I've said it before, but they're like the anti-Mercedes. They seem to have a fast car over 1 lap pace, and they're just so poor in the race. In the races, it reminds me of sort of 2013 Mercedes, where here and there they might be able to. Well, actually, to be honest, they don't even seem to have the pace to be able to pick up a win here or there. Once if anything goes wrong for the Red Bull ahead, they just fell completely back through the pack, and obviously Leclerc made almost no headway. Couldn't even get into the point. So, as you say, it's another dismal weekend, and there will be questions asked, I'm sure, at Ferrari as they're it seems that the change from Binotto to Lauren Mikes is not working. I think it's starting to get we're long into a dry spell of Ferrari's success here, and I just don't see them pulling out of this nosedive that they're in.
Yes, and a lot of good points raised there, Owain. Like particularly, Ferrari brought across, Ferrari got rid of Binotto, and they're arguably doing worse than they were doing with Binotto when you look at how things have gone so far this season. Phil, on Saturday, Fernando Alonso, as I mentioned, was running around with duct tape on his car. Today, he was coming on the radio to tell Lance Stroll he wouldn't attack him. Coming home in P6 and 7, was this the best Aston Martin could hope for when they simply just could not even switch on the soft tyres?
I guess so. I mean, Fred, with his duct-taped car, really was fighting. He was with a knife coming to a gunfight yesterday in qualifying. One of the first times all year where he didn't seem to have that ultimate pace in Q3. So, I mean, he wanted to do well. It's his home Grand Prix. All the fans are losing their crap every time he does anything. They probably were celebrating too when he went through the sand trap on his initial push lap. But either way, it was a loss. I mean, for Aston, now that the reality of Mercedes exists, this is a big step. This is a step backwards. They're now looking like now they're in no man's land, because they're going to have to respond, of course, with Canada coming up and the owner and the other driver being, that's their home race and all. But I know Alonso probably felt a little aggrieved at Monaco. I think they might have lost this opportunity, albeit a very, very small one there this weekend. They just weren't around. They had Ferrari helping them with Leclerc stepping on himself, and then you had Red Bull with Perez stepping on himself as well, and they couldn't maximize it. They got beat out by McLaren in qualifying. Ultimate pace-wise, they were at best, I mean, if we're going into it, they're at best, they were the fourth car, and they'd been the second car early in the year. Now they're starting to fall back. What will their upgrades be as they come along prior to the summer break? Will they be able to get back towards competing with Mercedes and with Ferrari? Or are they going to start coming back towards the McLarens and Alpines, which they have a big gap on? But are they going back to reality? That's the real question for them. But yeah, 6th and 7th, I don't think that's what they were hoping for when they came into this weekend, but it's what they got. And we'll see what they bring to Canada.
Yeah, and now being third place in the constructors as well. Yesterday, Tom did pose the question of whether Lance Stroll was going to cost whether Lance Stroll was going to cost Aston Martin P2 to Mercedes. I mean, he obviously brought it home ahead of his teammate today, but both cars did get passed by the Mercedes on track several times. But speaking of Mercedes, Warren, imagine if the Mercedes had started the season with side pods, P2 and P3 for them, who always looked pretty much on for a double podium. Hamilton's first podium since Sao Paulo last season. How was their race, and does the performance bode well for the rest of the season?
I mean, I think it has to. I was going to say, why did they not bring the side pods to the first race after last year? The whole no side pods didn't work. Like, that has to be the most ego move that they did of keeping the same car from last year to this year. When they put the side pods on the car this week, they're the second fastest car out there. They still are like 25 seconds. They did lose by 25 seconds. I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to take anything away from them, but they still are quite far off the pace of Red Bull, at least with Max. But that is the best. This is a best case scenario that you could have gotten from Mercedes today, second and third, because basically after turn one, Max, it's everybody fights for second. So they got the best they could have done. They held off Checo there. George held them off to secure the podium when it kind of, you never know if it could have happened, but he held them off. No, I think this is fantastic. And I mean, also, you got to say George Russell had probably the funniest moment of the race when he was claiming it was raining in turn 5, and everybody kind of got to the edge of their seat like, whoa, this could get interesting. And then a couple laps later says, no, that's just the sweat from the sweat inside my helmet, which is a very abrupt George thing to say. And it got everybody laughing. But no, I say all in all a good day. I mean, you could see all the smiles on their face afterwards and how happy they were. So, I mean, this is also a perfect track too to see how you have it, because they used to do testing. Everyone knows that. You can see what's going on. So I would say that they're only going to continue to get stronger, and they still have a big gap to go to Red Bull.
Yeah, they certainly do. And as you say, this is the track to expose your car. Lewis Hamilton was saying in the post-race press interviews that if you are fast in Spain, you're fast at most places as well. Obviously, Mercedes did have a pretty good race here last season, but they weren't generally fast in most places last season. But when you also consider that Ferrari had a bit of an implosion this time last season, we've just removed them from the equation. Well, Ferrari have removed themselves from the equation this time around. But Owain, if Red Bull had a clone of Max Verstappen, you can guarantee they'd be finishing this season at 1-2 every race, since they have to settle for the only one Supermax. They settle for Sergio Perez instead, who could only bring it up to P4. He underperformed in qualifying. Did he underperform in the race?
I'd say so. I think the biggest thing is that, he's got a car that's won by, his teammate in the same car has won by almost 25 seconds, to the point where, to the point where Max could have actually picked up a penalty and still won by a similar margin to normal. I think Sergio Perez is. I think he really should have been able to. They told him to look after his tires, and I think he really. I don't know whether George. I haven't looked at the lap times, but I don't know whether George in the last few laps upped his pace a bit. With getting rid of the lifting case to protect the tires once it was clear that obviously Perez was sticking at 5.5 seconds, but he only managed to claw in about 2 seconds on George. He really didn't make that much of an impact, and it just in the car. Obviously, he had an issue in qualifying, like you say, but he should have been up to be able to get onto the podium. That car should be, should be reminiscent of the 2004 Ferrari or the the Mercedes from 2014. Like it should be romping away with it. They should be getting 1-2s every race. It seems it's that quick, and particularly with the DRS advantage around here, and with the change to the final sector, meaning we're getting a lot more overtakes into turn one. I think he probably could have done better and at least got third, getting onto the podium. You had Corner claiming that Russell gained an advantage, sort of a lasting advantage, but I don't think there wasn't 3.5 seconds worth of advantage there over the entire race, and if there was, Perez should have been able to do something about it in the car.
Wait, was that in response to the incident at turn 1?
Yes, the original turn one where Russell went off. Christian Horner claimed that part of the reason that Perez wasn't in front and on the podium was because Russell gained apparently 3.5 seconds apart from 3.5
on
seconds
the long lap penalty.
Yeah, by going through that bollard. So I don't know what he's been watching.
Oh man. Phil, sticking with Red Bull, Max Verstappen obviously coming home 24 seconds ahead of Lewis Hamilton today in P1. Was there anything that would have stopped the Max Verstappen win today?
A meteor hitting his car. I don't know, a nuke. Maybe somebody deciding to sabotage his Honda engine. 800 pounds of ballast. I don't know. It's gonna take an absolute miracle, Danny Rick, that would do it. He would have done what Sergio did today. I mean he's online, or he's on pace to go and break that record that both Schumacher and Hamilton had with the most race wins in one season. Whether you put it as a metric of 16 races, whether you put it as a metric of 17 or 18 or 20 or however 8 trillion now as they have, he's on a different level, and it's where we're at. For the people that were not happy when Lewis was dominating, but they're happy now, okay. And for people that were happy when Vettel was dominating, but then it's what it is. It's what Formula One has always been, really. There's been very few years where there's been parity. Usually there's that one guy and that one team. And with Sergio Perez's basically confidence drop in last 2 weeks, the Drivers' Championship is already done. So it's more about Max going and just adding to his record book and seeing who he can pass in statistics. That's really what this rest of the season is for them, and for how many points they can get in the Constructors' Championship too. There really is nothing else for them. There's no challenge. They're not going to have a challenge until probably the end of the season from Mercedes. So it is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And Warren, touching on something Phil just said, yesterday after qualifying, Helmut Marko said that the race for the championship between their two drivers was over if it had ever truly started. Do you think that this is the case? And, after today, is anyone stopping Max Verstappen winning the championship at the end of the season?
No, yeah, the championship's over. I never really bought that Perez was going to had the muscle for the fight. This time, I was telling you earlier that I was over a friend's house to watch the race, and I brought up the question, how many races is Max going to win every race the rest of the season? Minus having an engine issue, no one really looks to be able to beat him just on pace, or maybe there's a wet weather race where they get a strategy wrong. He's caught out in a bad position, but I mean, he is the clear favorite in every race for the rest of the season. And I don't think it would be a shock if he won every single race going away. And even for the most dominant seasons, this is still pretty jarring. I'd have to say, how good he is in that car and how good that car is. It's astounding.
He certainly is. But he didn't win the Grid Talk Driver of the Day. No, the Driver of the Day for the Spanish Grand Prix 2023 was Lewis Hamilton. Owain, was Lewis Hamilton your Driver of the Day? And if not, who was?
I hadn't really thought about it, to be quite honest with you. I'm just trying to think. No, I think it's got to be George Russell, to be honest with you. He did an amazing job off the start. Obviously, he didn't finish ahead of his teammate, but he started in 12th, not 4th. So I think he did a really good job off the start. He did exactly what he needed to do. He didn't make the mistake that maybe some more we saw in the F3 race, some more inexperienced drivers make by not following the race director's instructions. We went past the bollard, managed the race, managed the time. It might be a criticism to call, to sort of see him playing strategist as well as he goes round. But yeah, I think it was pretty much a faultless race. There's something to be said for the fact that Lewis Hamilton couldn't make it realistically any further ahead. But I think George did a great job.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that, and certainly agree some fantastic moves into turn one, particularly how late some of them were as well. Phil, was Hamilton your driver of the day? And if not, who was?
Yeah, he was my driver of the day. I think the way that the season has gone also for Mercedes, even last year it was the other way around where George seemed to have the measure of Lewis basically the entire year. This year it's been the other way around. People were questioning, will Lewis come back and be motivated? Is Lewis still into this? I don't know why they didn't listen to their drivers, but Warren brought up a great point. I mean, you all brought up a great point. If they had listened to their drivers, maybe we would actually be in a position where no, they're not going to beat, what's his face, but they're going to go and at least be a little bit more in contention. They wouldn't have given Aston Martin a head start this season. He ran a strong race, best of the rest, and his energy and the positive feel they got going on there. I mean, he actually got a compliment out of Nico Rosberg. I mean, he was so busy going and blubbering all over himself, trying to put over Lewis. It was almost like he couldn't believe it. And then he was also sitting there begging Toto for a job again or something. I mean, it was pretty sad, but, yeah, he was driver of the day for me, and I'm going to one of his best racetracks in his illustrious career. I think he'll bring that energy, continue that energy forward into Montreal and these next few races going forward.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. And Warren, to cap it off, was Lewis Hamilton your driver of the day? And if not, who was?
I did vote for Lewis driver of the day, but I would like to make a change in that, or co-drivers. I think Guan Yu Zhou, I would like to put him as my co-driver or change it around, because I thought he really did have a exceptional drive today, considering him getting points and everything. So I'd like to give a switch, because Lewis was fine, but with that car being so good, that's the best he could have done. I thought Zhou outperformed the Alfa Romeo today.
Yeah, certainly worth a note. Guan Yu Zhou, absolutely. I think all the drivers mentioned today were certainly candidates, and I think they all definitely got a vote at least. So yeah, that was our review of the Spanish Grand Prix. Now we'll give the panelists a chance to give a little bit of self-promotion. Owain, where can people find you if they want to hear anything more?
You'd have to look back through the back catalogue, let's be honest. But you'll hear me as we mentioned before. I'm a co-host of the Grid Talk podcast, so you'll hear me hosting on future shows.
Yeah, and Philip, Grip Strip podcast, where can people find that?
Basically anywhere you hear podcasts, you can get the Grip Strip podcast. You can find us at Grip Strip Pod on Twitter. You can also find us on YouTube at Grip Strip Podcast. Josh, who has been on the show, or my co-host Josh Fine, posts that, handles the back end on the live when we're doing the show live as well. So basically, if it goes fast, we talk about it on the Grip Strip podcast. So if you want to listen to a more longer form show, one with a little less of a filter, you can go and listen to it during your week and while you're working, and get a laugh or two, and maybe get angry or have all the feelings in one sitting. So that's one thing that's great about the Grip Strip podcast. And we'll talk about this race. Well, basically everything behind the guy that won in this race, and we'll talk about IndyCar and NASCAR, everything that's going on. But of course, thanks as always, Ruby. Great job. Great to be on with you, Owain, and to meet you, Warren, for the first time, and Aiden back there hiding in great job by you all, and glad to always be on the Grid Talk. And get your Grid Talk merch from Redbubble. It's 20% off this weekend. So we don't get that sale all the time. Get your merch. Get one of these things. They're pretty cool.
Yeah, certainly self-promo, some Grid Talk merch. It's definitely, it's worth it. It is a good mug. And I know I'm really selling it. But Warren, Paddock Pals, where can people listen to that and hear more from yourself?
Yeah, you can listen to wherever you get your podcasts at. We're on Instagram, TikToks. Try and do some funny TikToks out there if that's more your thing, whatever. But my cousin and I, Rachel, do it. She's been on Grid Talk as well. We'll do kind of some like games or whatever during the week when there's not races. They'll do recaps and previews. Try to make some jokes. One of our segments during the races for our recaps is I forgot that you existed. So who's a driver that you probably didn't realize was racing that's always a favorite of ours. So that's always a fun one to do. So a lot of options this year. Let me tell you, a lot of options. So that's always something to think about there. And so, yeah, we'll check us out, Spotify, Apple, all that good stuff.
I presume the Williams drivers routinely showing up on that little feature.
Yeah, they do. We also try and make sure we don't repeat the same driver all the time. So we're trying to do a little bit more. Because I mean, you could hate to say it for the American boy, you could say Logan Sargent every week, and that just gets kind of boring. That kind of defeats the purpose. So we try and branch out a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. But on that note, Grid Talk is available on YouTube, where most episodes are recorded live. We also do a little bit of a post show to just talk about the things that we didn't get a chance to during the show, and also respond to you guys in the comments. But also available on Amazon Fire, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Verbal, and Pocket Casts. Just search Formula One Grid Talk for our huge back catalogue of shows with previews and reactions to qualifying and the race results. Please consider supporting the channel on Patreon so we can get mics, lights, and better recording equipment. Also, make sure you subscribe to the first know when each new weekly episode is released. We'll be back soon with plenty more F1 content. Thank you very much for listening to the Grid Talk podcast presented by Bet Online, and goodbye. Right, well, we have had some comments in the chat, at least very much from Jared and Tom Downey, Grid Talk co-host. But we'll start off just with Tom. Haas was such a letdown today, and I'll open this up to the floor.
I agree. I think they're a letdown. And is this the beginning of the end of Gunther at Haas, or is it too early to say?
I don't know the inner team dynamic. Has outstayed his welcome a long time.
Yeah, but I mean, they're kind of doing the same thing. There's really no improvement, and I don't know. I think a change is probably needed there. I hate to say it.
Well, that would mean that Gene Haas would actually make a change anywhere. He doesn't make changes with his Formula One team. They do the same crap, and they have the nut job running it. And then they have a NASCAR team that's literally the worst multi-car team in the sport. That is in Legacy Motor Club. So, I mean, Gene Haas is clueless. He's been clueless as an owner in motorsport for decades. It took Tony saving him years ago when he was in jail to make his NASCAR team actually good. So he would need somebody to come in and just swoop right in, influx of cash, and get in, have a good balance, driver balance, have a young driver, and have a veteran. I think the balance was good last year. The problem was Mick was just too rough around the edges, and he couldn't keep the car out of the wall. And then it's fine and well, you have two veteran drivers, but I think Kevin is not feeling as good about the car this year as he did last year. You have Hulkenberg, who is solid. He's a solid qualifier, but there's a reason why the guy never scored points or scored a podium in his career. At some point, you have to do something different. And it's like in one thing with Gunther too, when you look at how he's always been so against American drivers. And I'm not even using Logan Sargent as an example. I'm just saying in general, when you're the American representation in Formula One, I mean, I think that's also pretty bad. Because you're closing yourself off to a lot of marketing opportunities, and you're closing yourself off to having the opportunity to push the team forward. Even if the kid wasn't any good, at least you'd get PR. Having two veterans that have been in this sport for a long time, God bless them both. They're good, talented guys, but Nico Hulkenberg should be in a WEC. He should be running the 24 Hours of Le Mans next week, not in Formula One. And I think Kevin Magnussen, God bless him, should be running with his dad at the 24 Hours of Le Mans next week, not in Formula One. But Gunther Steiner lives in reverse land, so he just keeps on bringing it back to 2005 as though that's how it works in 2023 Formula One.
There certainly was a very long time that Romain Grosjean remained in the Haas team that I would say other team principals would not have had the faith of. And I think we would all be in agreement that Romain Grosjean didn't really deliver post, maybe even post Lotus.
Yeah, no, he wasn't. He wasn't much of anything after he left Lotus, and I mean, it's taken him how many years now, and he's in IndyCar. And he really only now is starting to kind of show. I mean, I think dude's washed. It's like it's okay. But he's going to be driving a Lamborghini LMP next year, so I guess he's doing good for himself. So,
moving on to another question from Jared Bradley. Are Red Bull due to bring any updates soon? The Merc's new design was a big step up for them and will likely get some more speed out of it in the next few races too. P.S. Lewis got the biggest cheer on the stadium of the three by a large volume. Owain or Warren, a response to that? Do either of you know about Red Bull's upgrade schedule?
Not a clue.
I thought they said this week that they were doing something different. If I'm being honest, I thought they said they were changing it up. Now I don't know if they were just blowing hot air, but I thought I read somewhere they were doing something different or changing it up. But I don't know.
I remember seeing a few memes suggesting that they might bring a zero side pod concept. And George Russell even joked about it during the the post race press. Just, Red Bull could bring a zero side pod package and still be 25 seconds clear of the rest of the field. Do we think that anyone would at this point attempt the zero side pods again?
No,
not unless they have a lot of money to waste. I mean, I don't know I don't remember offhand how many teams really went with it or some semblance of it outside of Mercedes. I feel like Williams tried something like it. I think McLaren had something like that as well last year. I think those are the three that I can remember. Williams dumped it within I don't know how many races, but then their cars were still really not that great. And then McLaren dumped it about in June. So it's like Mercedes was the only one that stuck with it. It was terrible the whole year outside of Brazil. And then whoever the geniuses are in their engineering department that thought it was a bright idea to bring it back to start the season deserve to be fired personally. But, I mean, just a complete waste. And then when you're watching Fred Alonso driving an Aston Martin and beating you, I think that should also, you don't need that if that wasn't the wake up call, then being garbage at Bahrain probably was. But I mean, Jesus, an 86-year-old guy who changes rides is beating you in Lance Stroll's or Lawrence Stroll's car, and you're sitting there with zero side pod garbage. I mean, Jesus, it's pathetic. You need to have something to watch with these races. So then that's really what they wanted to be. They just wanted everyone to talk about how bad their car was. I guess that's really what it was for. No, I guess bad press is good press. Maybe, I don't know, but
tell us how you really feel, Phil.
I know, man.
I think they got better press today by finishing second and third.
They did.
I think that means they actually are going somewhere. So good.
They certainly do, and the upgrades do seem to have brought them a bit of track time, and that is nice to see when they eventually got to run it on a racetrack. Obviously, bringing upgrades to Monaco, not always the best idea, but when you have a barometer that you don't really think is worth comparing to, why not just throw your upgrades at the wall and avoid the tight walls of Monaco? But we'll be back next weekend with a preview of the Canadian Grand Prix, and I'm sure we're all looking forward to that. Max Verstappen is going to win, but P2 and onwards is still up for debate. But thank you as always, Owain, Phil, and Warren joining me for the first time. And I'm sure we'll have, a good race week, maybe next week. But we certainly had a fun Spanish Grand Prix, in my opinion. They definitely made some good calls with the track circuit redesign. And on that note, thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.